The Hive Mind and the Consensus Reality Cult. By Rick Delmonico. The cartographers became so obsessed with representation that they built a map of great precision, not realizing that representation and reality must have a distinction. Over many generations they became so good at representation that the map covered the entire territory. In time all distinctions were lost until the map became the territory. Representation and reality blended into a boundless hyperreal where few distinctions could be made and no boundary located. The creature's creation became the territory of sensory distinctions in the precession of the hyperreal. Lucidity was lost in a sea of meaning where the sensual sought out pleasure for pleasure's sake. All activity concerned itself with increasing levels of illusion, the illusion of pleasure. All activity blurred into one great orgasmic rush of pleasure where distinction disappeared. The brain is reading fields we haven't identified yet. The brain can rewire itself over a period of time for the purpose of extracting value from its environment. Information has geometry and this geometry is expressed in the field. Our material reality is an interface where intimate disclosure and shared experience causes entanglement. The universe began in a minimally entangled state, coffee and cream still separated, and entropy is increasing entanglement or mixing/sharing of the information. The Big Bang may have been a phase transition of space-time. When all of the information has been mixed/shared, then the distinctions disappear. We are moving from a minimally entangled, ordered state to a maximally complex state and finally to a maximally entangled, random state. In terms of meaning or value, this is a bell-shaped curve that peaks in the center. All of the value is in this complex middle state. The reason we have a consensus reality is because consciousness becomes entangled by your connection to others. Our perception of reality is affected by this entanglement. The more information shared between individuals, the more entangled. This entanglement is a shared geometry where space and time are irrelevant. Behaviors exist in a hierarchy, or fractal scaling of event horizons. Everything inside the horizon that is shared information is in more than one place. There is a holographic feature to the information. If you think of the hierarchy as a geometry, we begin to see an image emerge that is constructed from the information. This image is a fractal nesting of wavelets. The information and the resolution of the image depends on the particular level in the hierarchy in space and time, being more fine-grained as you zoom out and more time passes. This entanglement or mixing of information has a nonlinear dynamic. The most valuable aspect of this dynamic is critical lighting at the edge of chaos. The variation created follows a fractal scaling law in time, space, whether a node is connected or not, combinatorics, etc. Is there wisdom in nature? Can nature discover which methods work best? A quantum random walk through state space in a rich environment will yield value, but how is this value measured? This would be something like pleasure seeking. This is a feedback mechanism, a process that could, over time, become sentient. The organism becomes better and better at expression or testing and experiencing or measuring value in the environment. Intimate disclosure is shared logic/reasoning along with an emotional component. Shared experience is basically physical or sensory input, although it is still quite complex. Sex would be a highly energetic combination of shared experience and intimate disclosure. The brain could be a fractal antenna reading a field. The brain is plastic because it is looking for value in the field. This is a geometry of information. To read the field, the brain must change its geometry, and if value is detected, the process continues. The same way that a root from a tree grows into an area where nutrients are located. The human is part of a complex system that is seeking value, and the forces in play are always balancing these dynamic connections with sophistication as an important feature. What we believe is shaped by these dynamic connections, and the value is a form of currency in the system. Sophistication creates more value over a broad range of agents, and unsophisticated behavior such as manipulation or apathy concentrates a smaller amount of value over a narrower range of agents. The energetic potential in the system exists in a hierarchy, with the logic structure or reasoning capability having less potential than the emotional component, which is more nuanced and energetic. I believe that this hierarchy extends into the spiritual realm, with the greatest potential being spiritual qualities such as love. So we see a process extending into space and time with the greatest value located in the middle or peak of the bell curve, and the hive mind is near the extreme end of the curve with little value remaining. The individual is nothing without the group, and the group is nothing without diversity. Self-organization is always seeking to balance the forces involved, which can be extreme at times. What we value matters, and we become what we are connected to. When we belong, we believe, and when we separate, we doubt. Sophistication is maximizing value. Love is maximizing value for others, and manipulation is maximizing value for self. Apathy and complacency are among the least sophisticated qualities. Wisdom is more concerned with the health of the system than the destruction of the misguided agents. If everything is information, then the difference between living and non-living things is the quality of the information. Life exists in a stream of energy, and from this extracts order. It is not possible to understand nonsense. The imagination uses nonsense to construct possibilities, and from this process a range of associations connects the possible to the impossible. If our material reality is some form of interface and if there is another underlying geometry involved, how would we notice it? I think, levels of description in information theory or something along those lines would be useful. Entanglement suggests some form of awareness. With humans, we are in a sense, entangled by intimate disclosure and shared experience. The information becomes shared to some degree of resolution. Complexity is the blending of perfect symmetry and pure randomness. This is where the arrow of time lives. I think these two extremes are elusive ideals. Why would Susskind say that the universe looks like a Rube Goldberg machine? Either the rabbit hole is very deep or the laws of nature have been broken. There is a principle of organization at work in the cosmos that reverses the arrow of time. Order out of chaos. The esoteric knowledge of the mystics. Life does this, but it appears that the distinction between living and non-living things is blurred. Consensus reality and the intentional field. Our influence on the field is limited by our fine hair-like connections to the field. The presence of an event horizon suggests that the information is at maximum compression. If the information is shared or entangled, then whatever is inside of the horizon is in more than one place. Fractal scaling of the event horizon. It is fractals all the way down. Nature is lazy, it likes to copy. The purpose of light, scale doesn't exist for light, light is the ultimate medium of exchange. The purpose of gravity, gravity is the means by which memories, consistency in space-time, are created. Combinatorics and networks is the idea that a relatively small group of interacting agents can recombine in a surprisingly large number of ways. Space is not an empty stage and it is not an ether, it is more like a nested hierarchy of action. The discrete bits are precise ratios of a quantum of action. Dimensions don't exist before action and not all dimensions are equal. This must be some kind of decision engine generating novelty, with the fuel being something like the difference between harmonic regularity and self-referential noise. Every engine takes advantage of a difference and we may not be able to name this difference. The Big Bang could be a large-scale phase transition in state space. Each step in the process has some range of choices, and when the choice becomes too fine-grained, criticality at the edge of chaos, it is the chaos that drives the choice one way or the other. This is a random walk, the testing of state space, the measuring of value. All value is not equal, and it is the network or range of associations that controls or decides what is valuable and what is not. The result is increasing levels of sophistication. The idea that value exists in state space and must be measured and located for some purpose suggests consciousness is behind all of this activity. The field of consciousness is a potential in which there are virtual particles, virtual dimensions, and virtual time. Think of this as a state space in which the memory is stored as our material reality, and the state space is the jumping off point for exploring new possibilities. In a quantum random walk in state space, all possibilities are explored in the entire space in an instant of time. Truth as a time coordinate, truth lives in the past, the future is uncertain. Truth as a scale coordinate, truth lives in the macro world, the micro world is uncertain. Truth lives in the macro past and uncertainty lives in the micro future. The heart lives in that space between harmonic regularity and chaotic uncertainty. Levels of description and resolution, irreducible complexity and incompleteness, combinatorics and networks, holograms and fractals, dynamic holograms and reiteration, dimensions and scale, symmetry and randomness, truth and chaos. The geometry of perception is built up from experience, however, there is no tabula rasa, the structure of the creature contains predispositions. The academics are constrained by their paradigm. There are no quantum waves, only quantum ratios. When constructing a room for recording, if we use the dimensions 1 by 1.6 by 2.6, we can minimize the standing waves in the room, so that no particular frequency is reinforced or cancelled to any great extent. I think that the principle involved has a great deal to do with consonance and dissonance. Volume, pitch and timbre are influenced by construction/destruction around a neutral dimension. The relationship between the Fibonacci sequence and phi ringing like a bell. Aesthetics is experienced as a blend of expectation and novelty, with sophistication relying on understanding. Less sophisticated is boring and too sophisticated is not understood or appreciated. The value or quality of the relationships as a meaningful expression. If the universe itself is seeking value, it could be in the form of a great symphony. Action as a step or an organized collection of steps. If evolution is correct, then nature has had a great deal of time to explore state space, or there are influences in the quantum domain that are able to do this much quicker. I believe the result is something like a multi-dimensional map of state space embodied in the structure of the creature. Humans are born with predispositions. Imagine every point of space and time expanding as a sphere at the speed of light, with each point having its own particular property. The result would be a universe of interference patterns. The entire world is obsessed with law, the lawful regularities of our physical reality. The law we experience is emergent, it is fractal. There are no perfect symmetries, everything we experience is an approximation of something else. The relationship of time and perfect law is something altogether different. There are many more ways to be disordered than ordered. There are many more ways to be unethical than ethical. Knowing good from evil requires a level of distinction we do not have access to. Light has the ability to explore state space in an instant of time. To give light, something must be consumed. Light pierces the darkness and is consumed, truth pierces the chaos and is consumed. If dimensions are virtual like the particles in quantum foam are virtual, then entanglement is information that is in more than one location, hologram. There are no particles, they may be wave packets, but the idea of quantum is a precise ratio of action in relationship to the environment. Feynman's path integral is not infinite, it is fractal. If you look at a star many light years away, the photon that hits your eye leaves the star precisely when the timing for the journey will end at your eye, because the virtual dimension of the journey is zero distance or zero time. Wheeler said that if your eye is not there to receive the photon, then it won't leave the star in the distant past. If the dimension in the direction of travel is zero, you have a different relationship than if it is zero time in terms of the property of the virtual dimensions. Each field is the mapping of a particular geometry of variation onto space-time. Sensation is the mapping of the environment onto the creature. Perception is the organization of sensation. Cognition is the organized integration of the mapping of sensation and perception into the map of meaning and value. The geometry of meaning proceeds like a dance. How to construct lock and key reiterative structures from waves. The purpose of science. Explanatory power, prediction, and control. The creature embodies a map of the world or environment within its structure. Culture embodies a map of all maps as a noosphere. This map is holographic, dynamic, and powerful beyond all imagination, for it is driven by imagination, the light and dark dancing. Evolution is one of the most unsophisticated ideas ever dreamed up in the mind of man. There is an organizing principle at work in the cosmos, and at each level of emergence, a new transcendent property begins expressing itself and testing state space as if it were looking for value or meaning. We are part of this process, and we have no idea where it came from or where it will end. There are many that will give an explanation depending on what they are connected to, but who is correct? How can we answer a question like that? Experience is a nebulous thing, we can only wonder. There are miracles everywhere you look, you just have to allow yourself to return to the mindful condition of childhood to see them. They are there whether you perceive them or not. I won't tell you what to believe, I'm telling you to look deeply into the place you are in and drink deeply from the well of experience. The more complex the symmetry, the more constraints. Emergence relies on constraints. Every sufficiently complex event is statistically impossible. Meaning is woven into the fabric of reality. There are no irreducible conceptual structures. G. Tonani is wrong. The boundary between the material world and the world of concepts is not discrete. Sacrifice and reward exist in the material world, beliefs do not, however. Beliefs become expressions and experience shapes beliefs. The idea that we understand the difference between good and evil fails to consider the complexity and interconnectedness of the infinite layers of influence. Our ability to understand and control this multidimensional system is limited by the resolution of each person in relationship to the mystery of their own mind and the branching out of complexity into a universe we can't explain. The trauma of your bliss is doublethink cascading into the event horizon. Sophistication is an organizing principle. A galaxy looks solid enough, but as you zoom in it becomes more and more apparent that there is enough empty space between the stars that if two galaxies were to collide, almost none of the stars would run into each other. It is the same for atoms. The reason you can't pass your hand through a solid object is not because of the particles, it is because of the electromagnetic field. Fields give material objects substance, not particles. A particle is probably something like a wave packet. In fact, the dimensions involved could have a dynamic that causes the geometry to be both or neither. A field is an area of potential, and it is possible that we have not discovered every field yet. Space is built up by the different fields, and the quality of the space is determined by the fields involved. Time has a dynamic, and as a sequence of action in a field, the quality of time is also determined by the fields involved. The sequence of actions in a field follow certain organizing principles. With enough complexity, the actions begin to transcend the principle of cause and effect. Transcendent properties are, by their nature, indeterministic. This is why consciousness can't be explained by the material relationships it is constructed from. It has been termed the hard problem. Descriptions of many of the behaviors in nature are incomplete, however, we have begun to notice some of the principles involved. Information is a funny thing. Logic can only get you close to a profound truth, but there will still be some form of incompleteness. Logic is related to symmetry. With maximum symmetry, you will have the most undifferentiation, and with minimum symmetry, you will have the most differentiation. In terms of information, it might look like the most likely outcome and the least likely outcome. Somewhere in the middle of all of this dynamic activity would be something like meaning. Meaning relies on complexity. The maximum complexity would not necessarily contain the maximum amount of meaning, but they are correlated.